In this video, I'm going to show you how to make your own jungle live set in Ableton from scratch with no sample packs. We're going to sample and create all of the sounds ourselves using Ableton stock devices and by sampling from across the internet. We'll cover the basics of putting together a live set that is totally your own and with which you can perform and improvise. Maybe you're a DJ who wants to add some live performance to their set. Maybe you've been making tunes for ages with an ambition to perform them live, but you just don't know where to start. In this video, I'm going to show you how. The music you're listening to here took me about 8 hours to make. That's everything, including all of the breaks, and it's only a small fraction of what I made in the process. This video contains everything you need to get started with your own live set, but if you do want to go deeper, you can check out my longer 11-part series on Patreon. The idea to put together a jungle live set came after watching Ned Rush's excellent series, Make Your Own IDM Sample Pack. A lot of the techniques I'll cover in this video are lifted directly from that. It's fair to say that what I have made definitely has an atmospheric flavour, but you can adapt it to suit your needs and tastes. To get started, you'll of course need a laptop, a copy of Ableton, at least standard, if not suite. My plan is to use Ableton stock devices as much as possible, but there is the odd Max for Live thing shown in there. Max for Live only comes with Ableton Suite. Ideally, you'll also have some sort of grid-based controller for triggering clips and scenes. Don't worry if you don't have one, as a lot you can do just with your mouse. I use the APC Mini and the Korg Nano Studio as my performance controllers. The APC Mini Mark II will set you back about £75 or $100 at the time this video being published, but you can get second-hand Mark Is for a lot cheaper. For this, I'm just using my APC Mini Mark I, which I've used for so many live gigs anyway. The Korg Nano Studio is a bit more involved to set up, so we'll leave that for another time. You'll also need a screen recorder or something to sample your computer's desktop audio. I use the amazing, very affordable Birds Rolling sampler and would highly recommend it. It's only $19. It sits quietly in the background sampling your desktop audio while it's running. When you're ready to get what you've been recording into your DAW, you can just drag and drop. First, I'm going to make 2 Ableton sets in my live set project. One for preparing the samples and building everything, and then one for the live performance itself. So my live set is just 8 channels of audio, 2 channels for breaks, 1 for bass, 1 for pads and atmospherics, 1 for melodics and arps, 1 for reverse transition loops, and 2 for one-shots and effects. I've also got 1 return channel reserved for additional reverb and delay. I've got a limiter on the master for protection in case things get too loud, and I usually add some light mastering, which we'll get to later on. This 8-channel format limitation works perfectly on the APC, as I don't have to faff about moving across in Ableton. I just go up and down. In my live set, each 8x8 section of clips has a unified sonic theme, almost like a track or a couple of tracks. Everything's created to be modular and for all of the clips to work together wherever I am in the set. I move between these different sections or modules as I go through the performance. Sometimes I jump about. And this is how I retain a sense of structure and cohesion and take the audience on a bit of a journey if I can. A bit like a DJ would do, with ups and downs, drops and breakdowns. It also helps me weave in moments of drama and excitement. I want the audience to feel like they're watching a DJ spinning lots of different records and not the same loops going round and round. We'll be making a single 8x8 section that you can expand and add to. My live set has evolved significantly over the years. And ahead of a performance, I usually like to add a couple more 8x8 sections and spend a few hours spring cleaning the rest of the set. Live performance is totally different to producing in the studio, but I find that both inform each other, and that I've had some real creative epiphanies as a result of performing live, testing out breaks, samples, ideas for tracks, complete tunes, and getting a sense of what works well in a club environment. We'll use this format for our live set for now. When we're ready to start testing our loops, we can chuck them in there and give them a spin. At this point, it's also worth deciding on a tempo and a musical key that you're going to stick to. This will be reasonably important, especially when we're making our drum break loops. It's also worth noting that with the APC, when the volumes faders are up full, so are the faders in Ableton. So I add gain compensation with a utility on each channel, including the master. We're going to be working at 170 BPM, but anything between 155 and 172 will work really well. We'll set up everything to work across a variety of tempos in the final performance, should you want to change the speed later on. For key, I like to work anywhere between F and A minor. For this, I'm going to be working in G minor, and I'll be sticking to this key for preparing all of my non-rhythmic loops. You'll also need to create a sample library for all of the loops you'll be creating, something like this for each type of sound. There are loads of places where you can get really top quality samples, and quite a few places for free, but for this we're going to sample or make everything ourselves. This is a great intro to sampling in Ableton, and will help you think about how you not only can get sounds into the computer, but then how you can process them and get them out and bolster your own sample libraries. It's easier to rely on sample packs. I use tons. In fact, I made and released one recently. But learning how to sample your own sounds and process them, having a process is the main thing. It's well worth the time. I also share the full version of my live set after every performance on Patreon, along with loads more downloads, project files and samples. I live stream my rehearsals where I'm preparing and rehearsing for the set. Be sure to check out the playlist below, the live stream playlist, where I've compiled every time I've worked on my live set on a live stream. Cool, now we're all set up, we can get onto the breaks. So I've chosen not to work with sample packs to show you what's possible with really basic tools and limited accessibility to samples, but it wouldn't be jungle without some classic funk breaks, and this is where we're going to start and where our screen recorder comes in. I used a limited palette of just 4 breaks, but you don't even need that many. Keep it simple to get you started and build up as you get quicker and more confident. The Think Break 3, the Enigmatic Tiny Break, the Hot Pants Break, and of course the Amen offer huge potential for at least 30 minutes of live set, if not more. If you had to pick one, just go with the Amen. First, we need to get the audio into Ableton, and obviously I can't play the samples back for you on here at the risk of being copyrighted. So they're just rolling along into the rolling sampler, and then I am going to drag them out into Ableton, and we're going to chop them up, make them into nice loops that work at our project tempo of 170 BPM before further processing. So you can do this by counting how long the break happens for at the original tempo, say 1 bar or 2 bars. You mark the beginning and just get right in on the transient. Then you find the end and you drag the end loop brace right up to the end as well. We're doing this with the Think Free here, and it's only 1 bar long. So get right in on the end. Look for the 0 crossing point before the next sound starts. Then you crop the sample, and I normalize it as well. We're just going to drop that gain down and hit warp, hit repitch. Now you'll see this is happening over 2 bars at 170 BPM, which is not what we want. It will sound too slow. It's only a 1 bar loop. So I just drag the kind of last transient and turn off quantization and just line it up right on the end on that kind of measure of the 2. And Ableton's quite good if you kind of click right at the end, it will mark with a warp marker there for you. Then we're going to drag the loop brace, and it should work at our 170 BPM tempo, the sound we all know and love. Once I repeated this step for all of the breaks, making them into nice loops, it was time to add some processing. I like to use a bit of EQ, compression, maybe some filtering, saturation, transient shaper here, some reverb. If you're not confident with this step, you can just skip it. I'm baking the processing in so that when we resample our breaks and chop them up, it's already there and we don't have to do any further processing. Try both ways and see which you prefer. So with the Tiny Break, this Max for Live re-enveloper device is something I love to use. I was also having a few hums and stuff on this break, so I had to do some surgical EQ to try and remove them. And then the re-enveloper is a multi-band transient shaper Max for Live device, comes with the Creative Extensions pack, so I use that. For the Amen, I do what I often do, which is kind of scoop the mids, smash the hell out of it with a compressor, mono it, and then add some reverb. The Fool's Gold break this is, which features the Hot Pants. I didn't do anything to it, didn't even mono it. Now we're ready to resample our sounds, and this will print the effects before we start chopping them up. You can do this the other way around, like I said, processing after chopping. Just experiment and have fun and choose the method that you prefer the sound of. We're going to create a ton of loops in the process, and they don't all need to be good. So we're going to keep things super simple for chopping the breaks. I'm going to use simpler in slice mode. We have our breaks tidied and looped so we can just chop them in. We don't even need to mess around with the warping. In slice mode, Simpler will mark the transients of the break with a slice point. It does a pretty good job finding these, and that's probably fine to get going with. You might want to adjust the sensitivity if it's not on every single transient, but I didn't bother doing this as most of the breaks are just 1 or 2 bars. If you're getting clicks or pops, you might need to fix the start points of the slices. Zoom in on the waveform and move the start point to as close as the transient as possible whilst remaining on 0 amplitude. I used Ableton stock devices for everything when making my set, plus Max for Live. But something like the Potenza DSP Amigo would be an excellent alternative for a sound more authentic to the genre. So now I'm just going to program in a few MIDI patterns to trigger our break in Simpler. To do this, I use through mode. This will play back the break continuously from the slice point to the end of the loop whenever it receives a MIDI note. Different slices correspond to different MIDI notes, starting from C1 on the piano roll. I like to work in 8-bar patterns when I'm programming breaks, which is something of a complete rhythmical phrase, particularly in jungle. And the easiest way to do this is to start with a 1 or 2-bar loop, then we duplicate it, we add some variation, duplicate it again, and add some further closing statement variation towards the end. I like to use gate rather than trigger, as you get a staccato cut-off effect when you shorten the MIDI. So for any type of musical genre or rhythmic phrasing, think of how you might have a conversation or structure a good sentence. There's a good closing point and you draw people in from the beginning and take them on a bit of a kind of arc. So you can hear that staccato effect here. So I'm going to do a handful of variations for each break. Keep it simple. It's definitely where I spent a lot of time in the set kind of programming these patterns. If you're just getting into chopping breaks, one important point to note is that some breaks behave a bit better than others. The breaks I've chosen here intentionally work well when looped nicely and chopped in Simpler. And don't be disheartened if you're struggling to get your breaks rolling, it does get easier with practice. Once we've got some patterns in for each of the breaks, I'm just going to jam out some variations and record them as long takes of audio. 64 bar long take should be more than enough. So I'm setting up a breaks resampling channel here. And essentially that means we're just going to record the audio from inside Ableton. So this is what we're going to do now. We're going to press record, just record long tapes with our clips. Check resampling's on. One thing I do like to do is use legato mode so that I can kind of create variations on the fly. I'm just going to hit record now, record the clips in sequence as they are, and then jam out some variations. You can also use other follow actions, so you don't even have to use your mouse or trigger anything, but it can be quite good fun to kind of just add in some of that human feel to it. So I'm just using my mouse here. We're going to make a nice 64 bar long piece of audio. I'm doing this with all the breaks. This is the Fool's Gold break from the start of Fool's Gold by the Stone Roses, which sounds like it's hot pants with some other stuff laid over, like some bongos. It sounds really good, actually. Some of the breaks, like the Amen, you can really dig into the patterns with. So the next bit I'm going to show you is probably the most important part of this video, and that is how we can turn these long takes of audio into nice 8-bar loops. First, we're going to jump into the clip, and we're going to normalize it just to bring some gain back into it. Now I'm going to jump in, I'm going to halve it 3 times. I'm going to right click and I'm going to slice to new MIDI track. I'm going to slice to a sampler. I'm going to do it by bar. I just needed to drag the end in a bit here. And I'm going to slice to my sampler by bar. And this is going to give us on every sampler slice a loop that is 8 bars long. So we right click into, we go into the sample slices, right click, crop sample. And this is going to crop each of those sampler slices into 8-bar loops of their own that will work at this tempo. Now, if we right click, show in Finder, we're going to be able to get those 8-bar loops out into our sample library. And this is something that kind of blew my mind when I saw it in the original Ned Rush series, and I was like, I can make something with this. And so that is kind of what got me started thinking I could do a jungle live set. And here we go, we have our nice 8-bar loops. And this is going to roll out across the rest of this live set in one form or another. So you can drag these over to your breaks folder in your sample library that we made earlier, right click, rename them something with the tempo in, so that if you come to use them later, you know what the tempo they'll work natively at, if you like, and just something so you can easily find them and search for them. And there we go. So now I just repeated this for all of the breaks, and within a couple of hours I'd built up tens of different break variations that are ready to go into our live set, that have got processing on. They're at a good healthy volume, so I'm not going to have to faff around with that stuff too much. They've been monoed with a bit of reverb, so yeah, we're ready to go. If you can get 4 8-bar loops of each break with different variations, you've got more than enough to get started with. Don't worry about nailing perfect takes for any of this. This is about generating lots of potential material, the aim being that some of it's got to sound good. So if there's one method that you favour over another for chopping breaks, then I'd encourage you, just stick to that. I've got loads of other videos and I stream live all the time about chopping breaks. I've compiled a playlist of all my break material, link down below. You can check it out and work through those videos. If you work through those, you're going to cover nearly everything that you can do with breaks in Ableton. And if there's something that really appeals to you, you know how you can use it to make up a load more material that you can stick into your live set. So now we're coming on to our bass sounds. Now, the sky is the limit of bass sound design, but we're going to focus on 2 foundational jungle timbres here. An 808 bass and also a Reese bass. So we're going to create instrument racks for both of these using analog. I feel like this Ableton stock synth doesn't always get the attention it deserves. It's a great starter synth in Ableton and you can do so much with it. So for a quick 808 style bass, select a sine wave on the first oscillator. You can leave the noise on or off. Then you're going to turn off the second oscillator. We only want one. Dial in a tight amplitude envelope by pulling down the sustain and leaving the decay at just over a second or somewhere like that. Experiment with different decay times and release times too for bigger 808s. For our 808 instrument rack, we'll set one oscillator to sine wave and we'll map some macros. We're going to map pitch envelope amount, pitch envelope time. This will help you add click to your 808, or at longer settings, that bass drop effect. Amp decay, sustain, release. These control how tight and boomy our bass will be. We're also going to pull in a drum bus for some distortion should we want it, and a stock reverb with quite a narrow EQ setting. At the end, we'll stick a utility for final volume control. So also going to map some controls on the drum bus. I am mapping the dry and wet, the transients and the drive and the crunch. So on macro 12, I'm going to map the utility gain with one spare macro. I'm going to dial in a tight reverb to give the bass a little bit of dimension. Just a touch is fine here, less is definitely more. So rename the macros however you see fit or not. I like to colour them so they're a bit more appealing to use. Then make sure you name the rack and save it in your instrument preset library in Ableton. I prefix everything I create with my initials for easy searching. It's good to include the type of sound in the name too, as that's what you'll probably be looking for in the future. So now we're going to program in some simple bass patterns with the aim of doing a similar thing to what we did in our breaks. Recording lots of variations that we can chop down into 8-bar loops, and we'll come to that in a bit. It's also a good chance to tweak your default 808 setting with a bit of musical context to keep it simple and direct. I like to pull in one of the breaks I've made already from the live set and then just have some fun programming something simple. Our chosen key of G minor should work really well on a club sound system, and hopefully you get to experience playing on one of these with what you create. I could take full advantage of Ableton's scale feature here. We're going to switch to scale mode in a MIDI clip and everything you draw in will work. Make sure you also have mono on in analog, which is something that I neglected to do at the beginning. With bass lines, simple is best. We're going to be working with the G minor pentatonic. And if you're not sure what notes to use, generally the root being the G here, also known as the tonic of our key, perfect fifth above, which is a D in the key of G minor, the octave, which is 12 semitones above our root, and the minor third are all good notes to use and they work really well. A lot of jungle bass lines are just the root, the fifth and the octave. Rhythmically speaking, we're going to keep everything on an 8th note grid. With bass, less is definitely more, but some embellishments at the end of every 8 bars can be good. Remember what we covered with phrasing with the breaks to tell a little story in each 8-bar loop, an opening statement, some kind of development and a close. Whenever you're doing any kind of jungle bass lines, it always helps if you program the hits of the bass along with the kicks and the snares. This is just a guide, don't worry about every bass hitting the kick and the snare. Maybe you can also make some kind of Reese. At the heart, it's going to be 2 detuned saw waves with some filtering and various other effects on it. So I created another instrument rack for this. 2 saw waves, then we're going to map some macros, and we're going to make use of all 16 here. Filter, resonance, filter envelope attack, decay, sustain, release. I also did pitch envelope. Make sure you do this for both oscillators on the same macros, or things can go a bit awry. We're also going to use some effects. We're going to use a saturator, mapping the drive and the gain. And I used an erosion for top noise and grit. It's brilliant on Reese basses actually. We're going to map the amount and the frequency. And we can also map the unison detune in analog. I decided to map the on and off here, which you can adjust in the advanced macro settings. I'm also going to stick in a chorus with our set and forget settings. We're not going to map anything to this. Make sure you got it in mono, in analog, and also I'm going to set the unison voices to 4. You're going to want your Reese notes to be reasonably sustained depending on the settings that you've dialed in. I like to play bass lines in with a keyboard when I'm doing this kind of thing, as well as record those, but if you're not sure, again, just stick to the minor pentatonic in scale mode or G minor. In the clip, like we did with our 808, stick around the tonic, the third, the fifth, and the octave. So we're just going to program some clips of different variations for the Reese, much like we did for the 808. Again, tweak your default sound to taste. Reeses are a bit like hi-hat patterns and you can lose your mind with them a bit. Once you've got a simple effective tone, just stick with it. So for each of these instrument racks, I captured simple macro snapshots to preserve our default sound. I also wanted to create a few more timbres using the randomization. If you do use this, make sure to exclude macro randomization from the volume if you've got that mapped. You can also use this on other controls and it stops things going a bit too crazy volume-wise and blowing your head off. You don't always get a good result, but it's a start for further tweaking, and sometimes you strike absolute gold. So once we've got some basic patterns that work in okay with our contextual drum break, we're going to do the same thing that we did with our breaks. We're going to jam out little clips as 8-bar bass lines. Just make sure you haven't got anything else rolling along with this when you're resampling, or you'll be recording that too. Follow actions, chance variation in the MIDI clips, randomization, all these things are fun to mess with. So once we've recorded these, we're going to do the same thing. Resample 64 bars or so, normalize, divide 3 times, slice to sampler, by bar, select all sample slices, right click, crop sample, show in Finder Explorer, copy to your sample library, rename, done. Now let's bring things to life a bit with some pads. This is probably my favourite part of music production. I really wanted this endeavour to be accessible. As much as I love Live's more intricate instruments like meld and wavetable drift and all those good things, it was actually a lot of fun just keeping it really simple and using an analog kind of limited palette of effects. It can be a really good exercise to just try programming in your favourite sounds or something you've got an idea for using a simple additive, subtractive synthesizer like analog. It's not too overwhelming and there are less options. So for the pads, I'm going to create another instrument rack. And I'm also going to create a kind of spatial effects rack here as well with various macro randomization in. So we're loading in an instance of analog here and we're going to group it, Command G, and we're going to map some macros. So we're going to map oscillator 1 shape to macro 1. And we're going to do the sub oscillator on that oscillator to macro 2. Now we're going to do oscillator 2, make sure it's on, the shape to macro 3, oscillator to octave to 4, then the filter, resonance, filter envelope attack, decay, sustain, release, amplitude envelope, decay, sustain, release, also unison mode as we did with our Reese. We're going to put some colors on these and rename the macros. You can do that if you want to, you don't have to. We're also going to make a separate spatial effects rack here. So now I'm just going to pull in some effects. I'm going to keep this as a separate stack of effects. We'll group it in a second. So once I've got all of these effects in, also use the phaser flanger, an auto pan. I'm going to use it in tremolo mode. And I also used an echo. And I'm grouping all of these. I'm going to make use of all 16 macros. I'm going to map some macros for the effects. So first off, we're going to do the chorus dry wet. We're going to do the rate. We're going to do the amount, the feedback, and the warmth. Then we're going to jump over to our phaser. We're going to do dry wet, moderate, amount, and feedback. And for our auto pan, we're going to do dry wet, sync rate, and phase. With echo, we'll map dry wet and delay time. For hybrid reverb, which I forgot to mention, we're going to put it in shimmer mode with a fixed convolution reverb. Just use something that's big and you like the sound of. And we map just two controls for that, which is dry wet and the pitch in the shimmer. So experiment with macro mappings here and effects chains. Save everything you make. Save it as a new instrument rack and you can add more macro snapshots in it. So rather than playing in lots of chords, again, I'm taking a generative approach. I spent a bit of time experimenting with different MIDI effect racks for the pads here before settling on a really simple chord device programmed with a kind of 7th chord. I made use of the newly added chance feature in the chord device that you can add per note, and this is a great way to get some chordal variation. So simple in just one device. So here's a close-up of the chord. You can see the chance settings in there. So simple. It's mapped to, it's got the scale mode on, the little purple button in the top. So I set an 8-bar MIDI clip. Yeah, it's rolling with a G3, 4 measures long, and over an 8-bar. So next I programmed in a good kind of basic synth tone and tweaked within a kind of drum and bass context with a break rolling along, so I've got an idea of what it sounds like. Experimenting further with the chord voicings and the controls in the chord device. Once I had a good default sound, I made some macro snapshots in both the instrument rack and the effect rack. This is a great, really creative, fun part doing all this stuff. Let your imagination run wild. Spend as long as you like here programming in different MIDI notes and saving macro snapshots. Had to do some seriously heavy lifting with atmospheric jungle, and you can never have too many in your sample library. So for resampling, it's much the same as we did for our breaks and our bass. We just sample a really long take, 64 bars or something like that. Then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to normalize it. We're going to halve it 3 times. We're going to right click, slice by bar to a sampler. We're going to highlight all of those slices, right click, crop by slice. Then we're going to right click, show in Finder, copy them across to our sample library and rename it. And that is it, done. We can just rinse and repeat. So another thing I did was I kind of automated the macro snapshots, and I just recorded longer takes where I just jump between those. Now things are sounding a bit deeper and more atmospheric, we can move on to our Melodics and Arps for some more spice. So next up is our Arps and Melodics. And for Arps and Melodics, I wanted to get even more generative than we have done already. So I wasn't exactly sure where to start with these, so I decided to give Operator a go. And for 90s Y2K atmospheric jungle, I often think of FM style synths, kind of plucky synths for melodic parts like Valley of the Shadows, By Origins Unknown, that type of thing. I'm not going to map anything here. I'm not going to create an instrument rack. What I ended up doing was creating separate channels with different MIDI effects on them every time I kind of struck on a new thing. I really like the chord device and the strum feature. That was giving me some excellent results. First thing I did was just program in a MIDI clip to just get started. And I wanted these kind of ascending, plucky things. Now, strum up or down is going to do that for you, either ascending or descending. So with just 2 of the operators, I kind of programmed in something quite plucky using a short envelope, copied that over to both of the oscillators. So I ended up, just trialing loads of MIDI devices. I stuck on an echo. Just had a MIDI clip kind of rolling. I ended up with a pitch device going into random, going into a chord, going into an arpeggiator, going into a scale device. I wanted to create a custom scale of G minor pentatonic with a major second. So I use this scale all the time. It's one of my favourite scales on the guitar actually for improvising as well. Even a simple chain like this is going to give you some great results. Here you can see the major second is just that note there that I've made different. So next up, I did quite a simple trick, but it's one that I do all the time. I just programmed in a bunch of clips with notes of different lengths, with follow actions engaged, set to other 100% of the time with link mode on. Every time you hit this, it's a bit like kind of a pianist deciding to play a different chord with some arpeggiation every time the clip is triggered. And it's just a way of getting a really nice randomization that isn't too hectic. So I just had this going into chord with strum set on a time that just kind of worked with the tempo, and it was giving me some absolutely beautiful results. I was kind of quite surprised, seeing as I didn't really have a plan when I went into this. I duplicated the channel every time I kind of had a setting that was working really nicely, and I was resampling all of these things as well. I used the arpeggiator from time to time and messed around with different controls on the pitch and the randomization, and the chord device too. I also had these chordal things that were working beautifully, again with these kind of follow actions in the clips. Just amazing with what you can get with a simple kind of variation set up with follow actions. So I decided when I was resampling here that I wasn't going to do the kind of trick that I've been using thus far. Instead, I was going to do longer 32 bar loops of the melodic patterns. So I literally just recorded 64 bar loops, duplicated it, and then split it in half. I normalized those and cropped them as well. And once I'd done that, I could just right click, show in Finder, and copy those across to my sample library. But you can, further mess with these once you've got them in the live set. You can set up loops, braces that are different lengths. You can warp them. You can do all manner of kind of additional manipulation once you've got them in the live set. It doesn't stop here. So as with the pads and the Melodics and Arps, we're moving away from like foundational timbres, adding complexity and thus possibility. If you're feeling overwhelmed by this, just keep it super simple, you know, something really basic. Now things are really starting to get rolling here. We can hear it in context. Yeah, it sounded pretty nice. So when I play live, I don't use headphones. I keep time by using reverse cymbal loops that loop every 8 bars. At their core, these are the quickest thing to make. If I show you what to do, you can just apply it with any sonic material. You could do it with resonant lasers and stuff like that. Stuff like that can be really cool. We've said no to sample packs, so I had to reach for Ableton's Max for Live drum synth cymbal. If I'm honest, I don't really like using this device. I find it is just a bit harsh, too synthetic and metallic, and it never seems to give me stuff that I like the sound of. But I'm assuming any producer worth their salt has at least one sample pack with a cymbal in it that you can use instead. But I was sticking to the brief of no sample packs and using everything that Ableton Suite came with. I think even if you went on Free Sound and searched crash cymbal or splash cymbal, then you're going to get something. So I had an expression control and I mapped some randomization stuff to the cymbal. And I was just recording some resampling here going into echo and also into a reverb to give us a big, spacious kind of cymbal. So it really is about the effects you put on this. Just experiment with mapping different things. Like in the expression controls, you could use LFOs as well, another Max for Live device. So we want a reverse cymbal that is going to do something that sounds a bit like this. We're going to have it's kind of like a mirror image of itself. The cymbal plays and then sweeps back on itself. The trick we need to employ is slightly different. I'm just resampling a 4-bar cymbal loop here, which is different to what we've done so far. Everything's been on 8 bars. So we got our 4-bar cymbal resampled here. I normalized those. And now because we want to create a slice with a cymbal on every slice, we only need to do it twice. So we divide by 2. Next, we're going to highlight all of the slices, set it to ping pong mode, and we're going to jump in to our MIDI clip here, and we are going to double the length 3 times because instead of 4 bars, we want it to be 8 bars long now. So when we play back this in sampler, you're going to hear the cymbal loop back in on itself. Another mind-blowing trick. And again, you can apply this to all manner of sonic material. So now we're going to want to freeze and flatten that MIDI pattern or bounce in place, whatever. So at this point, we can apply the trick we've been using so far. We divide it 3 times and we slice that to a sampler by bar. And then we highlight all of the slices in the sampler, crop and show in Finder. And that's how we create our reverse cymbal loops. For my 2 channels of one-shots and effects, I'm doing more generative stuff. Again, this is really another fun part of putting all this stuff together. I ended up just mapping a bunch of LFOs to operator. I had the operators, the oscillators on fixed mode so that they're just kind of scanning through the frequencies. I wanted to create some of these kind of like sparkly sounds, a bit like what you get in dub. So I just used expression control and I used a chord device and a random as well, and just programmed in a short MIDI clip with an arpeggiator as well to give me that rising tone. And I just had it kind of set up in a triad type of thing with a short arpeggiated clip. I had the re-triggering set on, instead of infinite, it was going to do it once every time it was triggered. I had a randomization afterwards that was set with lock to scale mode to give me further variation, and just a very tight envelope in the operator. I wanted to keep these dry as well, so we're going to have some additional effects in the live set. You don't want it too wet with effects. And for the kind of more crazy LFO style pitch effects, I had the oscillators on fixed mode. So you kind of just like, they're just scanning through the frequencies. They're not fixed to an octave, as it were. And I just basically went crazy mapping the LFOs to different things, to the frequency and to the LFO rate, and also to the frequency of the oscillators themselves as well. I had them in kind of different octave ranges. Just make sure you got a limiter on the master when you're doing this stuff, because it can get crazy. You also get some really cool results like this. Just try mapping loads of different things, and yeah, just have fun with it. A resampling trick is slightly different here in that we don't even need to divide the time or anything. We can literally just right click, slice the sampler, and it's going to do you loads of these one bar effects that we can just chuck into our live set. I've got hundreds of these now. My computer is full up of sounds like this. I also went to sampling Instagram as well. Whenever I'm on Instagram and I see like a reel or something I like, I'll just save it and then go back in a separate session to sample it. I searched acapella and I found a couple of acapellas that I thought I could use with these kind of vocal ad-libs that are going to work great. So I just kind of recorded those into rolling sampler.
When the operation of the machine becomes
the most important thing in life is reality.
If you're going to have sampling sessions like this, it can be nice to do them completely separate from the music production process and just build up your own sample libraries of cool stuff that you found on the internet. I dragged these into Ableton. I did a fair amount of stuff just to tidy them up a little bit, which was putting them into a simpler and scrolling around with the start point and the transpose to try and make things work in key. Some of the samples I recorded work better than others. That is what happens when you're sampling stuff. When I'd found those kind of like snippets I liked, I resampled those and tidied them up. Just kind of tidied up the beginning and the end points, normalized them and cropped them and got them over to my sample library. Nice, and these are going to sound great in the live set. And it was that easy, you know, it took me like half an hour to do this. So even if you don't have any sounds like this in your sample library, like vocals or anything like that, it just shows you how quick and easy it is to go and find them yourself. That's what makes something unique and original. It's your taste. Okay, now things are starting to sound really good and coming together. We can actually take these over, take all the sounds we made to our live set and kind of build up our performance. So now we've built up all of the samples, we can chuck those into our live set. So don't worry at all about things being correct here. This is something that we're going to tweak and refine over time and every time that we rehearse with it. Just chuck in some samples, get things going, work intuitively and instinctively with what you're vibing with at the time and what's working for you. You can always pull things out, you can always add more in. This is not something that's fixed in time, a bit like a production tune. Although we took care to normalize everything and kind of make sure things were working at sensible volumes, there's going to be a fair amount of tweaking required, and this is just part of the process. I spend a lot of time tweaking volumes, both in the clip and in the utility as well. I also spend a lot of time tweaking the delay times, Everyone likes different delay times. It's a matter of taste. So yeah, adjusting the clip gain, adjusting the utility gain as well. I've also got an EQs across some of the channels, basically everything but the bass and the first breaks channel. But all of the other channels have an EQ where I'm either carving off the bottom end or taking some off the top as well. With the vocals as well, particularly, I'm just kind of carving out space, so it's just top end stuff. So you can hear these pads are far too loud, so I need to go and I want to adjust the EQ. And really I should jump into the clip here and turn it down, but it's probably the overall gain needs to come down on the pads channel as well. Now for warp modes on the clips, you know, unless you're going to be changing the tempo, it doesn't really matter what you load them in at. But generally for breaks I use repitch, for bass I use tones, for the textural paddy stuff it's texture, for melodics and arps it may be tones, it may be texture. Just experiment with different warping modes. Again, this is where you can mangle the audio further, you can pull it out. Tweaking gain all the time. Some of the clips require different gain as well, particularly with the effects as well. Generally I don't have the effects looping, but when I chucked this clip in it worked really well, so I kind of left it looped on. It's a bit loud to be honest, but the idea was there. So you never know what's going to happen, and it's all about kind of embracing these happy accidents. On the master, I've got a limiter, minus 0.1 dB on the ceiling. Got bass mono on. I did some light EQ as well, just carving out some of the mids a tiny bit, doing a tiny boost at the top, a bit of a bump on the low end. I also had a glue compressor with some pretty light compression going on. This is subtle, but I find it really helps actually. So I often spend a lot of time as well pitching samples up and down, messing with clip automation for the effects as well on the return channel, doubling things in length. For the breaks, I often set them to legato mode as well, so that I can just add in variation on the fly and it's going to work with those phrases we baked in. I did some cool like time stretching with the breaks as well, which is something I've only started doing recently actually with a live set. Also adjusted the effects settings as well, kind of EQ'd the echo. I just solo this so I can kind of dial in the settings I want. Something reasonably high feedback, you know, it's not super loud in the mix and it's only one echo we've got everything going into. So the cymbals I've got follow actions on as well, so they're going to cycle through different cymbals for every repeat. When I'm performing, so much is just determined by, or I do with just controlling the gains, the volumes on the channels, and I leave space between like the different clips, as this is a really easy way for me to kind of get visual feedback when I'm looking at the live set, when I'm looking at the computer screen. I try not to do that. I'm just kind of building up performance. I'm trying to trigger things every 8 bars, and really I find this kind of helps map out something. This is a good framework to follow. Cymbals help me keep it all together. One thing you will find is it can be tempting to just like switch things all the time and like constantly be triggering stuff, but make sure you leave space, you know, let things develop. Don't be afraid to let things roll out, particularly when you're playing in a live setting and, you know, people are having a good time. You want to let the groove roll out for them a bit, you know, let them get into it and stuff before you switch things up. That's going to heighten the drama of the set. It's going to heighten the tension and release. And there's so much you can do with just a basic grid controller, a screen recorder, Ableton and stock devices, and then the volume and stopping the clips. Again, I'm tweaking the volumes all the time just while I'm rehearsing here. If you want to do breakdowns and things like that, just cut the bass, cut the drums. It's really that simple. Like here, just kind of going into a breakdown section. I'm riding this one shot that I added in randomly. And we're going over a switch now. And this is why I like to kind of have clips that could represent a few tunes just in the 1 8x8 section. So when you're playing live, the last thing you want is to have to think about too many things, which is why it helps to just keep everything as audio, keep everything really simple, don't have too many devices. If you want to make things a bit more complex, you can add in beat repeats on the breaks. This is something I do, something you can see me demoing on my live streams regularly when I prepare my live set. I usually dig into the detail of that a bit more. When you're in a club and things are rolling along, you just don't want too much to think about. You've got loads of people there, you've got loads going on, you've forgotten everything you thought you were going to remember, and you're trying to do a performance as well. So it really is important that you just keep it simple, keep it direct, for the set to be most effective and for you to enjoy it as well. You're going to make mistakes when you're playing live. I think if you do that, just move on to triggering something different. Things are going to be too loud, they're going to come in too loud, they're going to come in out of time. Don't be afraid to just let things roll on another 8 bars or another 4 bars. And there we go, your own live set. In about 8 hours this took me in total. And it was actually really fun. I did this across the space of 1 day. And it's something I repeat all the time on my live stream, something that I did in my Make Your Own Ambient Jungle live set that you can get on Patreon. And that's got loads more detail. If you want to follow along with that, there must be about 20 hours of stuff in there where you can watch me in more detail making loads of additional stuff. You also get access to the set I made, which is a bit more extensive in that video series, along with all the samples. And if you're just on Patreon generally as well, you get access to all the other stuff I've shared on there that you can use to bolster your own live sets. Big shout out to all my Patreon supporters. I think this is going to wrap things up now. So I hope you've enjoyed watching, and this has inspired you to maybe put some time aside in your diary where you're going to sit down and just make your own jungle live set. Have fun, keep it simple, start small, build it from there. It's going to be something that you develop over time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.